We welcome to the show now Cole Cubelic, an analyst with ESPN and the SEC Network on Mac and Cube every day on the radio, and has the Cube Show podcast. Recommend you check it out. As his most recent episode talked about Tennessee coming out of the spring. Cole, thanks so much for taking time to join us. As you were talking about Tennessee and looking at the Vols heading into this upcoming fall, what stood out? Just looking over the roster, looking at the personnel and the changes Tennessee will have going from 2022 to this upcoming season.
I think the first thing that stuck out is just how capable they are of being able to fill voids, and that's kind of how we judge teams going from year to year, right? What did you lose, and how close are you going to be able to get that production back and be able to fill it? And there's, of course, a massive advantage of taking a quarterback that was putting up Heisman caliber numbers that was injured with somebody that's actually done it. I mean, we've seen the next starting quarterback at Tennessee be a starting quarterback entering a season. We've seen him fill in for the back half of a season and be able to do that well. And then on top of that, have a special set of skills. So I think Joe Milton you look at first and say, wow, this kid's going to be capable of doing a lot of what is going to be needed to be able to fill in. There weren't a ton of those losses on defense, really. So you just kind of look at, okay, what have you added that could potentially be helpful? Who's returning? You know, you add Keenan Peely inside. I think someone who can be a little bit of a playmaker in different ways. And this is probably still going to be a defense that has to add pressure to be able to help it. Concern for me, you know, do they decide to kind of go young early? Do they still kind of stick with some veterans that have maybe been hit and miss? But I think the numbers, and this is something that I think a lot of people just don't want to talk about, but there are multiple position groups across the league, and the portal helps with this, where you might not have an all-star player, but collectively what you have, like I kind of look at Alabama at receiver. Like, there's no Amari Cooper, there's no Julio Jones, but collectively, I think they could be pretty good because they have good numbers. I kind of look at Tennessee's defensive line that way as well. You know, there's not going to be a dominant going to go take over games. You know, there's not a John Henderson that's going to be lining up over there. But I do think with the improvement that you've seen, like with what Amari Thomas did late last year, with how he looked, and some of the other guys coming on, you got a Tyler Barron off the edge. Maybe you get a young guy or two comes in, can help a little bit more. I think it can be fine. It can be enough. And obviously another year in the scheme, the system under Tim Banks, you should have a little bit better awareness of just how you're going to run it. And then the main thing was just weapons, man. Like, I mean, this is a team who's going to beat you by outscoring you. You know, they're going to put up points, and they're going to need playmakers to be able to do it. And there's going to be no shortage. Maybe a little bit of tight end comparatively, but I mean, this is an offense. You go back to UCF, they've played with less tight ends, lighter tight ends, and done different things. They can adapt to that. But I just think it's when you look at the production, Josh, of what was lost and how confident you are that it can be replaced, I think there's a lot to be excited about when you're looking at Tennessee football heading into 23.
I'm looking at two titles here, Cole. One is the tweet with the YouTube link. The other is the title inside of the YouTube link. The title on Twitter says why Tennessee can pass last year's win total. The title on the YouTube says why Tennessee could win the SEC East in 2023. Cole, you've been doing this long enough. You know how SEC fans are. What they read was why Tennessee will pass last season's win total and why Tennessee will win the SEC East in 2023. Cole, are you ready for the expectations for Tennessee football to be now through the roof?
I mean, listen, first off, it's Tennessee. I think we collectively know what the fan base is. I'm never going to say as much as you two, especially you, Jason, but I feel like of people in the media, I probably have a little bit better idea than a lot of other people, and not always for the best reasons, of what the expectations are going to be and what the thought process is going to be. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. You know, like I said, you've got there's two things for me, like I said, with quarterback and Joe Milton. And if Dante Thornton can run anything like Jalen Hyatt, which I've heard from multiple people in and around that building that I trust that says he can, then what the biggest difference is going to be up front on that offensive line. And this is, yes, there were times last year when you had a right tackle that was flat out dominant and probably still does not get enough credit for how well Darnell Wright played last year. And it's not just the Alabama game. I went back and watched the Kentucky game last week, and I was just like, good Lord. I mean, he's just abusing people in the run game, not in pass pro, in the run game. So to lose your two best offensive linemen is going to hurt, but this is also an offense that can circumvent that to an extent. Now, that doesn't mean you can just go throw, 5 of me right now in there and be okay. That's not going to happen, but I think there's enough there for it to be okay and for it to be able to offset some of the things that they need to do early on. So I have no problem with it. Like, why would you not want that to be the expectation? It's just, I think with expectation becomes sometimes a little bit of lack of reality. So if there's a game or two that's dropped, I would just say don't pretend like that's the end of the world. Don't act like the sky is falling. It's just sometimes teams lose games. And then, too, like the other part about the expectations are fine, but then when you speak in reality, like winning the division, okay, there's parts of the schedule that I really like the way that it lines up. There's parts of the schedule that I hate. I don't know how you couldn't. And, everybody wants to say, well, Georgia's schedule's so easy. Well, their schedule's easy, number one, because they're really good. It's a harsh reality, but like they're better than a lot of the teams on their schedule, so it doesn't matter. Is the non-conference a joke? Yes, it is, but sometimes it falls that way. I hate the fact that they play Georgia late. I hate it. I understand some people get nervous about a trip to Gainesville, whatever. This team and program should be ready for that now. That should not be of a real concern. I don't like anybody playing at Missouri in November. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like Florida plays there in November this year. I'm going to go ahead and say I think they lose that game. I don't like Florida going to Columbia, Missouri in November. It's not a good matchup. And the reason more so with Georgia late is, Tennessee's a team that when they're humming, like they're hell on wheels and they're tough to stop. So when are you most of that? Probably week 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5. So that's why I wish they could get Georgia a little bit late, because the depth is still not where it needs to be at a lot of spots. A&M, at Bama, at Kentucky, don't like that stretch at all. And then, of course, at Missouri, Georgia a little bit later. But I just think there's parts of the schedule that line up very well. Teams on that schedule coverage for the majority of a game and get away with it. Not many, I'm going to tell you. There's not a ton of them. And if you're going to beat that team, you have to be able to do that for a large percentage of the time. You can't go sit back in zone against that offense. You can't do it. You can't load the box against that offense. You can't just play way off the ball, because then they'll, reason that most people would much rather choose is to be able to play man coverage if you have the guys that can do it. I don't see a ton of schedule. I don't see a ton of just live in man coverage. There are a lot of things like that you look at and say, yeah, I got no problem with the expectations being what they are. It's just also have an understanding that the depth's not where it should be just yet, and you catch a couple pretty good teams late and maybe 1 or 2 of them on the road.
Cole Cubelic is with us, SEC Network, ESPN analyst, radio host covering what's going on in the SEC. And you had mentioned we got to see Joe Milton again as a starter because of Hendon's injury at the end of the season. What did you take out of being able to see him as now he transitions into that position full-time as the starter at quarterback?
I just think it's overall command of an offense. And I'm not saying that I would label him a game manager, but I honestly also don't understand why that's become there's such a negative connotation that comes with that phrase. I want every quarterback, no matter what my system is, I want a guy that can manage the game. Because to me, managing the game is an understanding of situational football, down and distance, where you are on the field, how to assure yourself that you get points, how to move the chains, how to not get greedy, how to avoid catastrophe plays. Probably, hell, I should have listed that one first. I mean, if you can avoid not giving the other team points, not giving the other team the ball in scoring position, like those are massive as far as winning football games. So I just think that you're going to see growth with him in all of those departments. Now, the part that we really don't know yet, does he have a legitimate changeup? Can he alter his velocity on certain throws? Some of the quick perimeter throws, some of the mesh concepts, some of the stuff over the middle of the field, short, intermediate throws. Doesn't have to be a fastball all the time. Is the accuracy going to improve there? Because none of us are worried about the deep ball. We know what that's going to be. And then I think he offers you a little more inside run too. Like he can give you legitimate quarterback power-based runs. And they weren't going to allow Hendon Hooker to do much of that, if any of that. So I just think that, being able to visit with him late, having him for that Vanderbilt game, seeing where he was, seeing what the coaches thought about him. And then, too, and I know people won't like this because he's already transferred, But we have completely lost sight of celebrating kids or crediting kids who don't just bail out at the first sign of something not going their way. And I understand he transferred. I get it. I'm trying to clarify that. But he also, in his position, there are a lot of guys that were gone, and they're going to be out of there. And so I give a kid a lot of credit, too, for saying, okay, I'm not going to be the starter, but I am going to stick it out, and I'm going to try to make the best of this. And I do think there are still good things in my future. And then I think when you do that, there's a much better chance of things paying off and going your way and you being able to make good things happen. So the experience that he's gained is going to be huge when he is the guy in charge for this offense this season.
Cole, you mentioned being able to circumvent, not having certain guys in certain positions, not having depth, and you can cover up some lack of talent in certain positions. So you heard a lot of talk about system versus the player, and Josh Heupel's system has gotten a lot of talk. What are some positions in your mind, offense, defense, where it's not necessarily the system? You got to have dudes at that position. Like, the system can't always cover it up for you. You got to have straight ballers at that position. What kind of position or positions, offensively or defensively, do you think falls into that category?
I think I'm going to say every position on the offensive line. But obviously, when you go as fast as they do, it assists you to a certain extent. Not having to stay on your blocks as long potentially wouldn't hurt you as much as it would in some other offenses. Some of the quick throws, pass protection is going to be different. You can be much more aggressive in your pass sets because you can be more high risk. If a guy beats you inside, it's okay because that ball's probably going to be out. But the main ones, I think, are the offensive line and the defensive line, especially the interior of both. I'd probably still say tackle. I think tackle is the hardest position to come in and play as a freshman. I don't think my mind will never change on that. But I also just don't think people understand the physicality of playing inside on defense in this league. Like having to rush the passer in one-on-ones, having to go chase balls. I mean, think about the amount of screens, perimeter runs, quick throws, quarterback runs, quarterbacks leaving the pocket. You still have to chase all that stuff down. You still got to go get it. And then, oh, by the way, you got 305 and 325 pounds double teaming you. You got to hold that point of attack so your linebacker can scrape off and go make a play. I just think what's asked of interior defensive linemen is maybe not so much from an assignment standpoint, but physically it's tough, man. It's brutal in those trenches. I think tight end nowadays is one that probably people don't talk about enough as to the difficulty that comes with that and the importance that comes with that. You look at what Tennessee does with the tight end, split zone where they come flat across the line of scrimmage. That can steal a linebacker's eyes. You get one false step from a linebacker, you're running inside zone, you're out the gate. That's a big play. The insert plays where it looks like they're going to run split zone, but they turn and go in between a guard and tackle, like that gives you an extra blocker. And once again, it forces defenders to think about different things that are happening, and they don't get that Reuben Foster beat on a play where they're sitting there waiting on a counter like 2 steps before it even gets to you. So, and I think now you got to be able to run, you got to be able to catch, you got to be able to block, you got to line up next to a tackle, you got to line up off the ball, you got to be able to split out in the slot, they'll put you in the backfield. So some of these tight ends they're asked to do so many different things, even though it's not going to be, pounding on Will Anderson every play. There's a lot of difficulty that comes with that at the same time.
Hey, Cole, before you go, do you know what's going to happen here? There's still debate, it seems, 8 games or 9 in the SEC. Is Greg Sankey giving you the inside info on that yet?
Yeah, I'm going to break that here on the show today. I have no idea where they're going. I don't see – the only way that I would say that you don't go to 9 games is if there's some kind of line drawn in the sand from ESPN and ABC that says we can't up the ante and we can't do any more for you. Because to me, that's kind of that's your ace in the hole. Like that's your trump card, where that's the last true addition to value that I think you have outside of adding other teams is going to more conference games. Because let's be real, what happens immediately when you do that? Your inventory increases in value because now we're going to get more, Tennessee Auburn or, Kentucky Ole Miss or, Alabama, Florida, whatever it is, Texas, Tennessee. We're going to get more of those games. And when we get more of those games, more people want to watch it, which means it's more valuable. So I don't think if Greg Sankey is assured that he can get his deal increased, then there's no reason to do it. And by the way, it hasn't really hurt the SEC as far as winning national championships. So I don't feel like that there should be a full sprint to get to it unless somebody steps up and says, oh, by the way, we're willing to put this up for that as well. And then you go ahead and you make that move, because then, like what Scott Strickland said a couple of weeks ago, he wasn't really talking about football, but he's like, we have to put more premium on playing one another. And I believe that, because I believe that in most sports, the SEC collectively is better than everybody else. I mean, look at softball, look at baseball, football, obviously. I think the majority of SEC teams are better than the majority of teams in other conferences, so there should be a premium and more value on playing teams inside of this conference. Football will get there. It's just going to take more money to do it.
Totally agree with that. As they have spring meetings coming up, we'll have media days before we know it, and throughout the offseason, you still get football coverage. Go check out the Cube Show wherever you get podcasts. That includes, if you want the video version, YouTube. Search Cube Show and subscribe. Swain and I have done so. He's Cole Cubelic, covering what's going on around the SEC and college football. Cole, thanks for all the time today. We really appreciate it and always enjoy talking to you.
Man, so you guys are 2 of my 20 subscribers. I appreciate that. Thank you guys very much.
We're trying to pump those numbers up.
This little baby podcast, trying to build it here. There we go.
That's right.
I appreciate you guys.
Most loyal watchers and viewers and listener, my friends. We got your back, Cole.
Thanks, fellas. Let's catch up soon.